As we inch closer to the first caucuses and primaries of the 2020 election, there is a push to figure out what issues could sway the electorate. During the America in One Room event, more than 500 people were asked to weigh in on the most pressing concerns in the 2020 race.
Immigration, taxes, economy, healthcare, foreign policy, and the environment, they topped the list. Joining us via Skype to discuss the findings from America in One Room is Sam Feinberg, COO and Executive Director of Helena, the organization that hosted the three-day event. Sam, great to see you.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, tell us a little bit about what you learned and surprised you the most from this the top line big findings in your opinion from this event.
Absolutely. So the goal of this event was let's bring 500 Americans, a representative sample of the entire country, perfectly representative or as perfectly as we can get them along every single dimension. So geography, race, gender, socioeconomic class, political opinion and leaning. Let's put them in a big hotel center and have them have conversations with each other about the issues that matter most in this election. And I think one of the most surprising things was that people are not as polarized necessarily as the media might lead us to believe, that people actually are deeply interested, deeply honored, and deeply engaged with the issues at hand. And I'll give just one anecdote to try and illustrate that. So on the first day, after which people spent 10 hours talking about the details of healthcare and immigration and environmental policy in small groups. They then sat in a big room, 500 people, and listened for over an hour to two tax policy economists. And were then told that time was up and they couldn't ask any more questions. And the entire room let out a big groan, an audible "aw," which I think just demonstrates the degree to which people felt a desire to be engaged, to listen to the detail and the nuance on the issues, and have discussions the likes of which they don't typically get to have.
Mm-hmm. So what inspired you to want to have this session? And if you could just dig into the details a little bit more of what people were actually doing in those rooms on those days.
Absolutely. So what inspired us is really simple. Our organization, Helena, tries to look at the world, identify urgent societal issues, and then attempt to address them alongside a group of people we call our members. So these might be academics or politicians or folks from the military community or human rights activists, and we try and work with them to identify important solutions to our most urgent social problems and then address them however we can. And what inspired us, I think, to work on America in One Room was just looking around and noticing the degree to which the country appears divided, the lack of avenues for real civil, nuanced, engaged, and deliberative discourse in American political society, and the hope that this process of deliberative democracy could help be an avenue to fix that. So what is deliberative democracy? Well, I'll start with an anecdote that its inventor, Jim Fishkin, Helena member and Stanford professor, gives better than I do. But in 1965, I think, George Bishop did a survey asking Americans all around the country what they thought of the 1965 Public Affairs Act. And people had all sorts of opinions, even though the act never existed. Mm-hmm. And what that story tells us is that people in normal polls, in normal political environments, will give opinions on stuff that aren't really based on their real democratic will. They'll give phantom opinions, and they'll do that for all sorts of rational reasons, right? If you're one voice among millions, it just doesn't make that much sense to educate yourself deeply on every single issue. There's a lot of them, they're complex, you're unlikely to have an impact, and you're trying to put food on the table for your family. So what deliberative polling does is give people time, the space, the incentive, the conditions really, to sit and think in a studied and nuanced fashion about the issues.
That is really interesting, Sam. Do tell us, though, what were the most polarizing issues? That's what I think is most interesting. So we have this message. There are some things that we can all come to consensus. What are the dividing lines in America today?
So there's an important distinction between what those issues seemed like they were before the event and then what they actually were after the event. So for clarity, people come to the hotel and they're given a poll when they first arrive or before their first arrive that ask them about their opinions on all sorts of things and also ask them some knowledge tests to get a sense for how informed they might or not be. And at that point, the divisive issues are exactly as you might expect, exactly the ones we hear on TV or read in the newspapers every day. It's things like what to do about the environment. It's things like immigration. It's things like tax policy and at what rate we should be taxing the wealthy and whether we should be offering Medicare for all, issues like that. And what we found is that when people sit for a three-day process and they interact with people that don't necessarily look like them or think like them, that might have different views, and become more informed on the issues across the board, across almost every single issue, people's opinions change dramatically, and they shift towards the center, moderate their views, and guide along much more easily and much less divisively than we might believe.
Interesting. I mean, looking at some of the data here, Republicans moderated their views on immigration quite a bit. Democrats moderated their views on minimum wage, and support for universal basic income also fell. There were changes on healthcare. I mean, like you said, on every issue there was sort of a moderating factor. How do you scale something like this up, though? I mean, obviously, America is set up as a representative democracy, not a direct democracy. Is there an idea behind, scaling this type of process so that people have more of a direct say in what's going on, or in holding broader conversations so you have more Americans from different ideological backgrounds in the room? Like, what do you see as the logical extension of this experiment?
I think that's a great question. I see two ways. One is top-down, one is bottom-up. So we'll start from the bottom-up. I think just watching some of the videos from the event, CNN did an interesting piece. We've got some videos that we're hosting. Just changes the way that you think about, or at least I think about, what a civil, engaged, nuanced, intelligent discussion about politics looks like. And I think watching that and being able to see a representative sample of 500 everyday Americans from across the country have discussions that are this detailed, this respectful, this civil, is hopefully a powerful experience for people, where they can see folks modeling what ideal discourse politically looks like and bring that into their own lives. And then there's a top-down way where deliberative democracy can be used to help enhance and strengthen the health of democratic practices around the world, which is use deliberative polling as a supplement to or a replacement for ballot initiatives, referendums, things like that. So we saw, I think, with Brexit in the United Kingdom, the #1 most Googled search term immediately after the vote was, what is the European Union? And it's not a political statement at all to say that when people are making phenomenally important decisions about the future of their country, that they should do so based on informed deliberation. So there's a way that you can, in places like Mongolia, and I know Iceland is currently considering it, integrate deliberative polling into the process that you use as a democracy to make informed decisions about the elections at hand and the issues beneath them. And that's something that we want to support.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Very interesting, Sam. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Next on Rising, on the eve of the next Democratic debate, Senator Bernie Sanders, he unveils a comprehensive plan to end corporate greed and corruption.
We're going to dig into the specifics of that policy with Sanders 2020 Policy Director Josh Orton when Rising continues.